everyone. I'm Megan McCarthy, editor of Africa Print. Thank you very much for joining us for Printing SA's webinar, outlining the regulations to the National Environmental Management Waste Act. Just some house rules. If you have any questions for the panelists, please post these in the Q&A section. The chat is just for general banter, so please use the Q&A section to post your questions. I'll now hand over to your host, Dr. Abdul Majid Mohammed, Chief Executive Officer of Printing SA.
Okay, a very good morning to all of you from Johannesburg. I'd like to first of all welcome all the 5 panel members that are sharing the stage with me today. So firstly, it's Anban Pillay from the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environmental Affairs. Then we have Kishan Singh from MatPac, Adri Spannenberg from Polystyrene Association of South Africa, Quentin Williams, and then Francois Marais. So having said that, let's start off with a short presentation from my side by way of introduction. All right, so this webinar is entitled Understanding the New Approach to Waste Management and How It Affects Obligated Printing Industry Producers. And what we're hoping to do in terms of the key takeouts of this particular webinar, we're going to look at the Waste Management Act and its implications, understand a little bit about what the circular economy is about. Then we're looking at certain key terms and certain acronyms that will be used very often today, which is the EPR and the PRO, as well as what we mean by a brand owner, a producer, and a listed product. Then we're going to look at perhaps the established PROs in this particular sector, and there are 7 of them, what they've done so far and the road ahead of them. And then finally, we're looking at what should interest the companies that are present on this webinar. That is, what should you as a company be doing about it? Do you have to register? Who do you register with? By when should you register? And then are there penalties for non-registration and non-payment of fees? So if we start off with looking at this particular National Environmental Management Act, the Waste Act of 59, dated 2008, and subsequent to 2008 till as recently as March 2021, we've had various government gazettes coming out, amending some of the regulations in all the different sections of this particular act. And Anban Pillay will possibly talk about some of these more recent regulations that have come about in the government gazettes related to it. Now, if you look at the circular economy, there are many graphic sort of representations of what the circular economy is. I prefer this particular one taken from one of the United Nations documents, which essentially hinges on 4 pillars, which is that is reducing environmental footprint as a start, generate increased income through the goods that are manufactured, reduce resource dependency, and then to minimize waste. So basically, up to now, we were in the mode of talking about a linear economy where people simply extracted resources, produced a product, it was used, and then at the end, it ended up in a landfill as waste. Right now, there's a big tendency towards changing that whole sort of mindset to producing, first of all, green products that are non-toxic, they have long life, and at the end of their lifespan, they are also recyclable. So in other words, the product design stage is talking about aiming for 0 waste. Then we look at the way the production should actually happen. We need to talk about using less resources, equipment that produce less carbon emissions, optimize manufacturing to the point that we have as little waste as possible. And then we look at extending the lifespan of that particular product. And what is very important in terms of the circular economy is this last phase, which is collect at the end of life, look at ways in which we can remanufacture the goods. And the very main focus should be on how to recycle waste, reuse resources, repurpose products that have reached the end of life, and how they can perhaps become raw material for the new product, and all this in order to avoid ending up in landfills, and obviously creating a new economy of the, the waste pickers, the collectors, and the reclaimers also having a stake in this particular process. So that in a nutshell is what the circular economy is about. I think in terms of the EPR, it means the extended producer responsibility, and it's to do with the effective and efficient management of all waste streams. And we talk of an EPR scheme that is developed by the PRO, and ensuring that this EPR scheme is workable for the sector that that particular PRO actually represents. The brand owner is normally the person or the category of persons or the company who makes or sells any identified product under a brand label. And the producer is the one who actually commercially manufactures the thing or converts the item or refurbishes it or imports either new or used identified products. So what are some of the listed products? And these are the 8, broadly speaking, that we will be covering today. But the Act also covers the electrical and electronic equipment and lighting sectors that also need to follow this whole process of establishing PROs and using an EPR scheme. So must companies register, and with whom? Now, up to now, 7 PROs have been established, and these are listed here for your just for your information. And we've managed to secure 4 of these PRO representatives that will talk about their respective PROs that are in place and the wonderful work that they've done so far. In terms of penalties for non-compliance, there is a fine or imprisonment. Also, EPR fees have to be paid on a rand per ton basis for all importers and producers and converters and manufacturers. This fee is paid directly to the PRO, and the PRO itself will be held accountable. And every one of these organizations have to register within the department before the 5th of November as the end date. And what should companies be doing? They need to register with the Department of FFE before this date and earlier if possible. They should also register with the PRO, declare the consumption of the relevant products, and also pay the PRO fees directly to the PROs. Okay, so that short introduction. I'd like to introduce our first panel member, which is Anman Pillay. He's the Director of Waste Policy and Information Management at the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment. Over to you, Anman. Your sound is off.
Good morning to everyone on this in attendance at this webinar this morning. Yes, my name is Anman Pillay, and I'm from the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment. Coming to EPR, I think we've said a lot already in the introduction. However, the focus behind the work that we're currently doing and how it affects many people is as follows. We would understand that currently our landfill sites are being filled at an exponential rate or being depleted, the airspace. And with the current rate we're going, our landfills being filled up, it's difficult for us to approve or to get alternative sites for landfilling. And that is the traditional way of how we dealt with our waste. Now, looking at the international and global practices these days, we are moving towards the circular economy that has already been alluded to. But what we have to also change is our mentality of just taking resources, making whatever we need to make, use them, and then just disposing them. We have to extend the resources as much as possible. And the reasons for that is because they are limited. We do not have an unlimited amount of resources. Now, having said that, the circular economy is something that has worked in the other countries or internationally, and we are trying that approach here, and we have to make it successful no matter what. As the country and as citizens, we have to make it work for us because we've seen the benefits of such. Now, if you look at some of the principles that we have contained within the legislation, We also have the polluter pays principle, and EPR is, the polluter pays principle is embedded in that. And the specific reason for me mentioning that is to implement EPR, it comes at a cost. It's not for free. And that cost, somebody has to bear that cost. And I think the polluter pays principle is where that comes into being, and it will be determined where the fee is going to actually be charged to implement this scheme. In the government's priorities that we have, you would recall that, I mean, in many forums, this has been reiterated, that the priority for government is job creation, SMME development, poverty alleviation, and finally, a better life for all. Now, we see EPR as a opportunity, a perfect opportunity to meet some of these indicators or some of these targets that we have as such. Many would know that from the PROs that are on here with me, representatives, you would understand that you currently have a whole host of people involved in your sector, employed, be it full-time, part-time, or whatever, but they are gainfully employed and they do make a living that is able to sustain themselves. With us formalizing the EPR now, or legislating it as such, the expectation is that we would see more structured job creation. We would see more people being gainfully employed. And also, we want to also see the environment being protected. Now, in the regulations, I'm not going to go through the whole regulations. I've been allocated 10 minutes, and rightfully so. If I have to go to the regulations, you're going to be sitting here for 2.5 hours just listening to me. But in terms of a summary, and Dr. Mohammed did highlight some things, but in terms of a summary, the main things that we've done in these regulations, especially the one that's been published on the 19th of March, which we are in the process of finalizing, is a separation of responsibilities. We've allocated specific responsibilities to producers and to producer responsibility organizations. We have separated this so that people know where their area or their scope of work lies. We've also made provision for producers that want to run their own scheme. That's allowed for in the legislation. And the reasons for such is, if you choose not to pay a fee to some other PRO to manage your product at the end of its life, then you have the opportunity to run your own. It does cost some money, which you have to find. But be that as it may, I think it's a choice that each company or producer will have to make. Now, in the regulations, we have put in provisions to promote the development of small, medium, and micro enterprises. And that's for a specific reason. That's a government priority, so we've included that. We have also put in some measures to protect existing service providers. And we have a fair understanding of what happens when you have new institutions coming on board. And we just want to make sure that everybody is protected in the sector that is currently out there. And when I'm talking about protecting those people, if, for example, you have a buyback center that is operating, running a good business, financially stable, and being quite successful, with the introduction of the PROs, we really don't want to see such a buyback center being excluded because for whatever reason, we're saying that if they have been successful and they're operating the space, they need to be incorporated into the system. So we offer some protection in terms of that. And then we have a large focus also on the waste pickers. The waste pickers, and I'm sure the representatives here today would agree with me, they form the backbone of your scheme as such. Without the waste pickers, you have a lot of work to do. So we have protected them and we're calling for the integration. The regulations require them to be integrated. And also the draft regulations, the proposed regulations, also call for compensation for these waste pickers. And that compensation still has to be worked out. But the view of the department is that they are doing work on behalf of a producer and hence need to have appropriate compensation. And when we talk about compensation, we are talking beyond the value of the material that they collect or bring in as such. So that is where we're going in regards to waste pickers. Then we have a whole host of governance requirements, and we also don't want to create something that is going to cause us more problems. And the governance issues, especially on conflicts of interest, we have burnt our fingers in the past regarding conflict of interest. And that is why we try to protect the department and make sure that these regulations do not promote such behavior. On the reporting side is quite a critical and key component of this because the reports actually demonstrate the success of the system. And the reports will talk to jobs created, and we've moved away from job opportunities. We're talking about jobs created, actual jobs where people are working and getting money and earning a living as such. Now, the jobs created is one portion. Then also the amount of, or the tonnages of material collected, reused, recycled, etc. Now, those are the reports that we will be interrogating from a department as such. Then we also have a component on monitoring and evaluation. We have provisions in the regulations currently that allow for us as department officials to conduct audits or verifications of some of the information that has been reported. We have also provided for mandatory take-back of certain products, and I think we did a lot of criticism because there's a blanket provision in the regulations on the 5th of November. So we have and where it's necessary, we have listed those products that have a mandatory take-back, and for obvious reasons, we don't want them in our landfill site. We've also addressed the transformation issue quite seriously, and I think the issue of targets, we have included targets and we will hold the producers and the PROs accountable to these targets because these targets have been agreed to and we've put them in place. And for us, we want to see value for money because there's a cost attached and there's fees going to be paid. So for us to be able to see what the return we're getting on that investment, be it the consumer, be it the industry, be it government, we want to be able to measure that. And so those targets will be a clear indicator of where we're going. Now, we as a department have put in a whole host of requirements in the regulations together with industry. And I want to put that out that when we developed this amendments that was published on the 19th of March, it was a joint development process with representatives from industry that participated and provided input into the regulation. So we have significant buy-in from industry regarding the amendments that we published now on the 19th of March. Now, having said that, and I think Dr. Mohammed quite well in his presentation, that registration is before the 5th of March, 5th of November, May rather. Sorry, it starts on the 5th of May and must be done before the 5th of November. So on the 4th of November, 23:59:59 should be the last time that you try and log in. Thereafter, you are non-compliant if you look at the conditions contained in the regulation. So I'm just making that clear. I know there's the 5th of November put in there, but he was quite clear it's before the 5th of November. That doesn't mean it is the 5th of November. So the 6 months expire on the 4th of November. Now, those are the requirements that have to be adhered and complied with. And I think as government, we are taking the compliance and enforcement quite serious. I think you would have seen the offenses and penalties. So yeah, so please take note of that. And yeah, I've just given a brief overview and I've summarized some of the provisions. I've not gotten into detail. As I said, it would take me a lot of time. But yeah, thank you for listening. And yeah, thank you so much. Back to you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Anwar. I think I must admit as well, I was going to say this in the beginning, but I think the department has worked very closely with the private sector organizations in fine-tuning this actual regulations as well as the Act. So we've come a long way together, and it bodes well for the future sort of mutual sort of cooperation and partnership that we have between the government department as well as all the private sector organizations. But thank you, Anwar. All right, let's move on to Francois Marais, who is the Business Development Manager of Fiber Circle, and he represents the PRO that covers paper as well as paper packaging sector. So over to you, Francois.
Thank you, Dr. Abdul. I don't know if everybody can see that.
Yes.
Okay, so put it onto, there we go. Yeah, so basically, I just want to do something here, sorry. So basically, talking about paper. Paper was in a fortunate situation that the paper manufacturers have been starting to recycle paper for many years. So we have a good history behind us at this stage, and currently the average recycling rate of all the paper sectors, and there's of course quite a few types of paper sectors available, we've been doing over 70% average recycling rate, and this would equate to over 15 million tons of paper and paper packaging, which was diverted over the last decade. And it also, saved 47 million cubic meters of landfill space, which I think was quite important. Just to put some perspective on it, it would equate to about 2,878 soccer fields and 18,985 Olympic-size swimming pools of volume. So that's quite a lot. So if we look at paper in South Africa, so most paper, or all the paper that is produced in South Africa, comes from two sources, and this would be from fresh, or what we call virgin fiber, and that's mainly from sustainable farmed wood, and also, of course, from the recovered paper fiber from both pre and post-consumer sources. And there's also a small degree of bagasse, which is the sugarcane waste, which is also used in some of the mixes. And the paper, therefore, comes from responsibly managed certified commercial timber plantations and never from indigenous trees in South Africa. So in 2020, we've recovered 1.1 million tons of paper. And of course, paper is a renewable and a recyclable resource, and it also stores carbon for its lifetime. So if we look at the value chain, so in 2019, the Fiber Circle was launched by the paper and paper packaging manufacturers. And this basically boils down to the recycled paper fiber and sustainable or virgin fiber that we get, which also includes, of course, paper and board manufacturers. And there is also an amount of imported paper and board that comes into South Africa. This would flow through to corrugators, converters, and printers. And part of the value chain, of course, would be importers of specifically liquid board packaging, for instance, brand owners and retailers, of course, our consumers. And then, as Mr. Pillay has pointed out, the collectors, the informal sector is, of course, a huge part of this. Transporters, balers, buyers of paper, etc. So there's quite a long value chain in this stakeholder situation. So the key focuses for us is working with all our stakeholders in our value chain to ensure, of course, that less paper goes to waste and that more goes into the recycling loop, and so the circular economy. And through this member and industry collaboration, Fiber Circle's EPR programs will be across all the product classes, and this will drive investment in, and it, of course, is not limited to this, collection infrastructure and facilities, research and development, specifically for difficult to recycle and difficult to collect products, Lots of education and training for waste collectors and small businesses, SMMEs, consumer awareness campaigns. Of course, we need to try and continue to drive behavior change. And this would, of course, also cover the aspects of transformation and end-of-life development, etc. If we look at the paper sectors that were identified in the regulations, so we basically got the office and graphic papers, magazines, newsprint, backing paper specifically for or release liners from adhesive labels, corrugated craft products like cardboard boxes, which I think everybody knows, and then of course the liquid board packaging, beverage cartons, and this would of course cover aseptic cartons and cups, and then of course the paper sack and bag sectors. So who is Fiber Circle? So Fiber Circle is a producer responsibility organization. We meet the criteria outlined in the department for the EPR regulations. We are an autonomous body established by our producers. We of course a registered non-profit company. We are managed by a board of directors, and this would comprise producer representatives. We are compliant with the South African Companies Act in terms of good corporate governance and management of conflict of interest. And as a member, you will be part of course, determining the EPR scheme and fees for your particular sector, which is important. Thank you very much. Thank you, Doctor.
Okay, thank you, Francois. I think the Q&A section is open, so please pose your questions at that particular tab. All right, we then move on to our third speaker, which is who is Adri Spannenberg. She's the CEO at Polystyrene Association, as well as the South African Vinyls Association. So currently she wears sort of two hats for two different PROs, but she'll, I suppose, talk about that as well. So over to you, Adri.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I appreciate your introduction and the opportunity to be here and share with you what's the work that we are doing and have been doing. As you mentioned, the Polystyrene Association was actually formed about 10 years ago, just so that you know. And yes, we've been tirelessly working at this for the last 10 years. Mostly all our members are converters and producers, taking their responsibility for this initiative of EPR and being the producer very seriously. Not many of the brand owners importing or manufacturing polystyrene, or not manufacturing, bringing polystyrene into the country, are actually aware of how much they are bringing in. So we are moving now and very thankful for the opportunity to get those members on board too, because they bring a lot of polystyrene into the country and we believe they should be responsible. So together with the local converters, we are focusing on getting them involved in the whole process, which I really mentioned. So I said the Polystyrene Association aims to minimize the environmental impact of polystyrene in the environment. We are very passionate about cleaning up. We are very passionate about South Africa. We are passionate about our consumers. We really want to make a difference in the life of the South African market, or people, consumers, because that's all of our responsibilities. I believe we live in a country that we really need to play our part. And as businesses, that is what our members have been doing. So how much polystyrene have we recycled? When I started 10 years ago, it was next to nothing. So we really needed to create end markets in South Africa, and we've created it and successfully done so, that we are now at a recycling rate of 2019 of 12.6%. We have very steep targets for the EPR. We've set it for ourselves. We are adamant to reach those. So we have the plans in place to do that, and actually we have already achieved a lot of that, and are able then to unlock these potential markets for South Africans, and thereby creating jobs in our industry. Similarly, we are recycling the tonnages. I'm sure you realize that polystyrene is lightweight. It's 96% air. Therefore, it's got a really low carbon footprint up to the point of using. We really encourage everybody to recycle their polystyrene. There are recycling initiatives across the country. So please feel free to contact me and I'll put you in contact with a recycler in your area. We have recycled the volume of 20 Olympic swimming pools, which just gives you an idea on volume. As I said, we operate across the country. We've been able to establish 45 recyclers across the country. Most of these are in the picture frame industry, which I'll show you some examples of now. But this is growing daily, and I think we're in the fortunate position that there is a demand for polystyrene, and we are operating with these recyclers to make sure that they also recycle as much as possible. So what does our market look like? As I said, most of our market is 53% in the decor market. So all those picture frames you see hanging on your local picture frame store, they were made from virgin material when we started out 10 years ago. That whole industry has moved across to recycled material. So it's 100% made out of recycled polystyrene in South Africa now, with 4 factories across the country. Our recent growth has come from the lightweight cement market, which you can see there is the Builders lightweight concrete. It's at 14%, and it's grown to that in the last 5 years. And we see a huge demand in that area, with factories opening as we speak. As I said, polystyrene is 96% air, 4% product. And what do we need to unlock this potential product to recycle it? It's technology. And the technology has been set up in South Africa, that we are able to now collect polystyrene, reduce the weight, and transport it efficiently and effectively. Our plan also includes the logistics side, unlocking the whole logistics side of polystyrene recycling. And what we've done is, I prefer to show a picture so that everybody can see what is happening. We have 2, actually 3 now, opening very soon, of these factories. What these factories are is a small entrepreneur business. We have located in specific areas that are already in existence. They're already working in the area. They're successful in Paarl and Atlantis, and the other one will be in George, opening soon, and also in Durban. So what we're doing is we're engaging with the local community, finding a beneficiary or an entrepreneur that wants to grow his business, support them, give them all the skills, give them the equipment, so that they can also collect polystyrene out of their specific municipal hub or municipal area. And then it's all about collection and beneficiation. So the beneficiation is the part we've been working on over the last 10 years, as I said. So there is a demand for polystyrene, and therefore we really need to get it to the recycler. And this is the role that buyback centers, recyclers, waste pickers can play in this role. And that is why we are targeting of working closely with them. So what do our projects entail, just so that you can have a bit of an insight into what the recycled polystyrene goes into. And as I said, the Project Build, what we call Project Build, is the lightweight cement product. It has been Agreement approved, SABS approved, NHBRC approved. It's an easy product to build with. It looks similar to a normal brick. So we're not bringing new technology into the country. We're bringing a product that our builders and our laborers already know, and we are teaching them how to build with this product. Just to show you the process, it takes, what you can do is have expanded and high impact polystyrene, which is your yoga tub. So that yogurt tub that's printed with your labels in the printing industry, it is also recycled into these bricks. We don't have to separate it. We don't have to, well, we need to separate it from other plastics, but it doesn't have to be separated from the paper label. Slight contamination's also okay. So as long as there's not big pieces of food involved, separation at source is obviously what we are focusing on. So our plan is, our work that we've done so far is that 20 kilograms of polystyrene goes into 1 cube. In a 10 cube factory, we will create 7 jobs. So this means 7 jobs on top of the actual collection. So there'll be collectors that will be created jobs, but in the factory itself, there'll be 7 per area or per hub. We are able to build 1 house of 42 square meters per day with the blocks that comes out of a 10 cube factory. Just to show you, this is what's happening right in South Africa already. Post-consumer polystyrene being baled, being shredded up, being used into this lightweight cement block and building homes. Houses, from houses to shopping centers to everything can be built with this product. It is not a product that is foreign. It's easy to use. What are the advantages of this product? It has a fire resistancy built into it, so it does not burn. The fire rating is very high. You build accurately. You are effectively using a material that will give you a warm winter and a cooler summer. And we are obviously cleaning up our land and our country, and that's what we're pushing for. So a 100 square meter house will use 500 kilograms of polystyrene. I'm going to touch very briefly on the picture frames because this is an established market, but they also have a huge capacity to grow this industry. So we are really supporting them as far as getting material out of the industry. 40 or out of the environment. 41 hamburger clamshells will make a A4 picture frame. And yeah, please just obviously scrape the plate clean before you recycle it. The source is not a problem. As I said, the yogurt tubs are also recycled now into the lightweight cement, but we also recycle them into these desks for disadvantaged children who don't have a desk. 1 kilogram of yogurt tubs makes a desk. And these are sponsored by industry so that children can take this desk home. I work with mine too every day. It's an awesome product and it's made locally in South Africa. We also run bread tags for wheelchairs. Just briefly, we're very passionate about this product this project because we really help people getting a wheelchair, people who don't have one. And what we find really works about bread tags for wheelchairs is that a small little bread tag that you recycle creates this whole feeling of, you know what, I'm recycling something small, but I'm really making a difference. I'm really helping someone who could not have a wheelchair. So we work closely with the Quadriplegic Association of South Africa, schools, communities, and making a difference. We take our health and safety very seriously, so we make sure that our products do adhere to all food compliance, EU food compliance regulations. And for those of you who don't know, polystyrene does have the lowest carbon footprint of all packaging, and therefore we need to be even more responsible and recycle it. So we really need to make sure that a product that is resource efficient, cost effective for a majority of our South Africans who can't afford the expensive packaging material, we want to give them that, but we also want to make sure that we look after the environment, recycle the material into a product that will help them and sustain them in the homes for a very long time. There are our members at the moment. It must be updated because, as everybody on this call knows, we've grown, and thank you to government for supporting in growing our membership and making sure that we can do even more than what we have been. Thank you very much.
Okay, Adri, thanks for that wonderful presentation, and I think you We have highlighted some of those projects that are really making a big impact on the beneficiation and the downstream benefits of job creation. Okay, we then move on to Kishan Singh, who's the CEO of Medpack South Africa, the metal packaging industry of South Africa. He's also the MD of Global Integrated Business Solutions, the Global Ambassador of the World Packaging Organization, a National Education Officer for the Institute of Packaging South Africa, as well as the Chairman of the Academic Advisory Board, School of Operations and Quality Management at the Durban University of Technology. Over to you, Kishan.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. Just going to share the screen. All right, we can see the screen, can we?
Yes, perfect.
All right. Firstly, on behalf of Medpack South Africa, thank you to Printing SA for this initiative. I think we appreciate the intention behind it. And we obviously are very supportive of such initiatives ourselves, promoting the education and awareness of the latest regulations relating to EPR fees and circular economies. And thanks to Anban Pillay and DFFE for the initiative. I think South Africa needs it. This, by the way, is not just a South African initiative. Globally, every single country is having exactly the same pressure points right now in industry. And so we are not alone in this. Some countries, of course, as in Europe, are a bit more mature and further ahead, but nonetheless, we have lots of learnings. So this morning, I'm just going to give you a slide. As I said, we've only got 10 minutes. And so not much can be done in 10 minutes. But I think we can give you a very, very brief synopsis of what is happening at Medpack. So the purpose today is really just to introduce Medpack, discuss some short-term goals, the current challenges, and let's talk about metal packaging and how it is really very, very supportive in terms of circular economies. So who is Medpack South Africa really? We are the PRO, and we believe we would like to be the PRO of choice for metal packaging in South Africa. And our role is then really to establish the metal packaging industry as a valuable contributor to environmental sustainability through the investment of post-consumer packaging recovery and reutilization. We will support and represent our members of parliament on industry matters relating to operational, regulatory, and environmental issues. And of course, we will promote the benefits of metal packaging. And the rest of this presentation will really be me singing the song that metal packaging is really the preferred choice and really one of the most suitable materials for packaging recovery and recycling. So who exactly sits on the board of Medpack? We have Coca-Cola, represented by David Drew. We have Charles Muller, Toughlex. Charles Muller, by the way, is ex-executive director of Packaging South Africa. And he comes with vast experience of the sustainability issue in South Africa, having been in that space for the last 10 to 15 years. Mohammed Dasot represents Dasot's, or Tin Can Man. This is quite a big metal packaging converter in Johannesburg. Hulamin sits on the board as well. And Hulamin, as you know, is the source of all of the aluminium, or not all, but most of the aluminium that we use in South Africa. And Ricardo Benedetti is representing Hulamin on the board. Klaus Haas represents Nampak. And Nampak, of course, there's two major companies in Nampak that are converters of metal packaging. And that's DivFood, Diversified Food Packaging, and BevCan, manufactures all the beverage cans. Then we have Mark Helfrecht from Nestle, also a very powerful component of the board. And Ishfaq, actually Ishfaq will be replaced by somebody else from the Coca-Cola Bottling Association. And we've already had some discussions with them. But essentially that's the board members, and my role is to integrate the activities of the board and report on the entire metal packaging value chain's performance to DFFE at regular intervals. So this is what we actually do. And reporting into me, remember, we are not a very big organization, and we're also not a very old organization. So reporting in through me, doing much of the work as well, is Monique Holzhausen, and she's responsible for media and communication. Anna-Marie is financial services, SaaS, and Laura does most of the administrative stuff. MedPac South Africa was born in 2016. The idea came about 2017. It was registered. So we are really just about 4 years old. And the reason that we have come a little bit late on the scene is really in response to the legislative requirements. Historically, MedPac did not exist as officially as we do now, but metal packaging, I must reiterate, has been collected, recovered, and reused as far back as 1970. So initiatives, through the NAMPACs at the time and ISCO, if you will remember, now known as ArcelorMittal South Africa, but then Vanderbijl Park, known as ISCO, where the main drivers of metal packaging recovery. For obvious reasons, metal packaging has intrinsic value, and it sort of propels itself through the value chain post-consumer. This is why we enjoy higher metal packaging recovery rates in South Africa. So who actually have been supporting us and our members? This, and exactly as Audrey has said in her membership list, this is changing literally on a daily basis now. And I think thanks a lot to the current influence of the regulations, I am seeing a very much increased interest in PROs and the work that we're doing, and what's the requirements of joining and compliance. So thanks to Anbin and team out there for doing an excellent job in getting the energy in the industry. What are the short-term goals of MedPac? I mean, when I say short-term, I mean by end 2022. Well, firstly, let's establish MedPac as a credible industry representative PRO. Make sure that we are fully compliant with the requirements of NIMWA and the edited gazettes, which we are fully intentional of doing. We will continue to drive the public awareness campaign, which we have been doing over the past 4 years now, through the consumer and through the industry. By that, I mean we are actively involved in generating notices, creating communiques, and actively participating in radio and talk shows, and like this now again, to push the agenda of circular economies, particularly in the metal sector of the packaging industry. Of course, we will drive and promote membership campaign. This is starting to become quite a big issue now, especially in the last, I'd say in the last month and a half, 6 weeks. I've seen quite a few interested parties asking me to start talking to them about MedPac and what do we do. And so I'm very excited about this, because this then means that we can increase our membership, and that therefore means that we'll be able to do more than we thought we may be able to do. Because remember, everything that we can and will do is purely dependent on our membership drive and EPR fee that we collect. So yeah, so there's an increased interest in joining PROs. The target at the moment, I would say, looking at this picture here, with a few more like Unilever and Colgate and things that are joining us soon, we are now representing some 42% of the industry. When I say 42% of the industry, I mean 42% in terms of the tonnage. The last report from BMI Research reflected 190,000 ton. So in other words, the total metal packaging that we put into South Africa per annum is 190,000 tons. Call it 200,000 tons. The rough split is 50,000 aluminium and 150,000 steel. So those are the two major components of metal packaging, aluminium and steel, or tin plate, sometimes we call it. So we are saying, let's move from 42% of that tonnage to 50% by end of 2021. And it's very doable, given the rate of interest and the rate of activity in terms of membership at the moment. We believe that we can do that. And then we feel that by 2022, end of 2022, we should move that number to 60% of the 200,000 tons that's actively participating in MEDPAC. Of course, there'll always be this free rider issue, and I think Anban and team have recognized that, and there's quite a lot of ramifications by not actively participating and not being compliant. There's obviously issues, regarding fines and penalty clauses. So this, we hope, will not be a big issue, but yeah, there'll always be free riders. Then we actively support this recycling value chain to increase capacity, collection, and recycling. By that I mean looking at the MRFs, looking at the balers around the country, and looking at the opportunities for financially supporting additional opportunity, additional infrastructure. Why? So that we can increase the collection rate, which I'll speak about soon. Also, I believe that separation at source is an absolutely great opportunity. I think that separation at source, if it can be executed and executed correctly, will improve our collection rate across all the substrates. You can increase it by 7 to 10%, within 2 to 3 years, if we can hit that separation at source opportunity correctly. Then, of course, the way to make all of this happen is really to stimulate the demand for the recyclables, because if there is a need, obviously then the whole process of collection will be more effective if there's a need or a demand for recyclables. So we want to find ways and opportunities for stimulating the demand for recyclables. And of course, we want to drive packaging. Remember, the other thing is, in addition to stimulating demand, that's a little bit of a reactive approach. But the proactive approach is, let's fix it at the design. When we're designing the packaging, let's think about the recycling opportunity, the recovery, how that packaging is going to get through post-consumer, through the channels of waste pickers, through the channels of material recyclers, MRFs, and that sort of thing. Let's let's design it so that it actually supports the recycling and therefore circular economies. Some of the current challenges that MEDPAC faces is the actual waste segregation at the buyback centers and MRFs. You must understand that the guys at the buyback centers and MRFs are not thinking, you must understand that it is their means of income. So they're not thinking only packaging. When they look at metal, they look at metal in every aspect. It's not only packaging. It's metal, waste cars, waste bumpers, waste this, waste that, and there's a whole lot of metal that gets to the buyback center and the MRFs. So the idea is to find a way, and this is a lot of thought has to go into more effective ways of waste segregation and therefore waste reporting, and therefore integrity of the numbers. So to me, the statistical reporting, and currently we have BMI research, and yes, this is the best we have, and thanks to BMI research for the wonderful work that they've been doing over the last 15 years or so, reporting on packaging statistics in South Africa. But of course, remember that it's no fault of BMI research that we have the reporting infrastructure the way it is now. With Section 18, on the horizon, the need for greater accuracy in reporting and less estimation in reporting is now paramount. So it is therefore our vision is to interrogate the current baselines. And we know that the baselines are not pretty accurate, although Anban will disagree with me. And I know that we've been submitting BMI reports to department over the last couple of years, but there is some uncertainty in it. And we must get it right so that we have a proper baseline and therefore we can accurately report on KPIs. Currently, I must tell you that the 2020 report, 2020, which reported on the 2019 operational year, BMI reported a metal packaging recovery of some 79%. That's of course a consolidated figure, which means that it represents both tinplate and aluminium. One of the things that we need to do, especially now with Section 18 expectations, is to separate that, is to try to get higher resolution of data And we want to split that reporting into aluminium and tin plate. In fact, we want to split it even further. Aluminium can be split further into used beverage cans, UBCs. And we believe that, this is a very, very good number. And we're quite proud of that number, but we know that it's in the plus 80%. But we need to now go and interrogate it and verify it, and then report on this accurately. The other thing that's very important is, of course, the measurement systems that we're using. And I think all the PROs will be jointly getting together to have a common measurement systems, because the measurement system accuracy is paramount to leveling the playing fields and understanding or being comparative with reporting.
Sorry, Kishan, can you just round up, please?
Yeah, okay. And then levying the EPR fee is also a problem. And aerosol packaging circular economies. I'll just end up with a quick video on what should you be doing. I think this has been spoken about. Register with the Department of Environment, Fishery and Forestry before 5th of November. I'll skip to that slide and just end up.
When we look at the world, we see just how important recycling is. More than 50 million cubic meters of waste is generated in South Africa every year, piling up in landfills, polluting land, rivers and oceans, and doing irreversible damage to the environment. Recycling can help change that. Hulamin's aluminium foil containers are 100% recyclable. Aluminium is the most recycled material in the world. It can be reused over and over again without any loss in quality, so it never has to be thrown away. In fact, more than 70% of all the aluminium that's ever been made is still in use today. Recycling also saves energy. Recycled aluminium only uses 5% of the energy needed to make primary aluminium, and that's quite a massive saving. Every recycled aluminium foil container can save enough energy to keep a 100-watt light bulb on for 4 hours. Because they are lightweight, strong, non-toxic, and stable in all temperatures, aluminium containers are ideal for various uses in the food industry. And yes, you can safely use aluminium in the microwave. Hulamin aluminium foil containers, sustainable packaging that's good for people, the planet, and business.
Thank you, Dr. Mohammed. Apologies for overrunning. I'll back to you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Kishan. Okay, we then move on to our final presentation, Quentin Williams. He's the business manager at Polyco, the Polyolefin Responsibility Organization. Over to you, Quentin.
Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Kishan, if you can just end your screen share. Thank you very much. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to give you an overview of Polyco and also what we're doing in terms of our EPR scheme going forward. So our 2020 and 2019 highlights. So this has been updated slightly. So we've been operating for about 10 years, and that's through a voluntary scheme. And other PROs, as you've heard, they've been also operating in a similar time frame, with Petco, which we look at PET, has been operating at a voluntary scheme for more than 10 years. So producer responsibility companies have been around investing into recycling for quite some time now. And since we've been established, we've invested current numbers, 52 million, but we have committed of more than 65 million. So we have committed 65 million, and of that we have invested into the recycling industry 52 million. And what did we actually do with that money? We have collected over 63,000 tons of polyolefin packaging, and we have recycled 23,000 tons of that polyolefin packaging. So this investment goes into companies to expand their capacity to collect more polyolefin packaging, as well as recycle more polyolefin recycling. And like my other PRO counterparts, we're also using a comparative description for our tons, and this translates into 10,500 elephants or 3,800 elephants as well. And then year on year, since being established, we've been seeing an increase of 2%. So that's 4 kilotons per year of an increased capacity in polyolefin recycling. And if you look at our stats, so the blue line on top is the Plastics SA number in terms of the survey that they're doing. Every year, Anna-Beat Pretorius goes out and she interviews all the large recyclers and get an understanding of what they're doing in terms of their recycling capacity. And then the red line at the bottom is where we've been investing into companies. So you can see there's a nice exponential curve in terms of the tonnages growing over years in terms of capacity being developed in the sector. We do not only invest into recycling and collection companies, we also look into other areas and how we can improve and grow recycling in South Africa of polyolefin plastics. So the packaging mobile units are the units that we understand need to go into rural and lower income areas, because there's only about 5% of people separating waste at source. And this is predominantly in your middle income and your metro municipalities. So we've developed packaging mobile units to go into other areas and incentivize people to also understand that there's worth in waste. Packaging is also developing from a mobile unit to a static buyback center as well, which we'd like to establish at malls or other shopping centers or where people congregate. And then we're also focusing on a school campaign to get the message further and have more people separating at source. We're developing a project specifically in Buffalo City, East London, where we're working with the municipality to establish packaging static buyback centers for residents to drop off waste, or if they want to be paid for the waste, they can also use it as a buyback center. And then we're going to have staff cycling around the town into designated areas, which are going to be maintaining separation at source bins at street level. So what we're trying to bring a message over is that if you throw the material on the ground or into the bin going to landfill, that is not making an income for someone who is collecting recyclables. So rather separate your waste and put that waste into a recycle bin. And this is covering all range of materials and not only focusing on polyolefin plastics. Oh, and just to give a description, if you do not know what polyolefin plastics are, those are your milk bottles, your large yogurt tubs and your ice cream tubs. So it's the plastic code number 2, 4, and 5. We also are investing in terms of research, in terms of how do we increase our post-consumer recycled content into packaging. At the moment, most polyolefins don't go back into food contact packaging. They get recycled into other products like buckets or bins and basins. But we are working on technologies or investing into areas where we can get a post-consumer content into our packaging. We've also done research to understand what is the recycling rate of HDPE bottles. So broadly, in terms of a PRO, we look at the broad recycling sectors, and then we also zero down into research on specific products to understand them better, to understand if we have to make changes to improve their recyclability. And our research illustrated that the HDPE milk bottle is recycled over 80% in South Africa. We also looked at how our yogurt tubs and margarine tubs and ice cream tubs are reused in South Africa. That reuse is normally when you take a product back to a store and have it refilled. So we use the term repurposed. And this is the data just launching over in terms of where material lies in South Africa. And we have found that, just move over the image, that between 6,200 to 8,200 tons of ice cream tubs, margarine tubs, and yogurt tubs are repurposed. This means that people are not sending them for recycling. They are using them at home first to either as a makeshift lunch container or freezer storage, and then it's making its way into the recycling sector thereafter. Then we have a recycling campaign where we're trying to get more people to separate at source. And this is through our digital media platforms. And we're trying to get more than 1 million South Africans in South Africa, and more than 1 million South Africans to say that they are recycling. This is our current numbers in terms of our digital media campaigns, and it's growing every day. So a little bit in terms of our EPR scheme. Polyco is a member organization, and currently most of our members are in the rigid polyolefin packaging manufacturing sectors. We do have two that also represent flexible and multi-layer. Therefore, when we are developing a plan, we'll be focusing largely on our members, which are focused in the rigid packaging sector, but we will also be accommodating flexible and multi-layer for the two members that are producing that type of plastics or using those type of plastics. As we get more memberships into the other two sectors, then we will start developing broader and more robust plans for those sectors. But our main focus is to cover our members that have signed up to date. And then in terms of our plan, we have mapped the value chain from resource extraction all the way to use and back into the value chain through the recycling. And we have identified how these stakeholders in the value chain needs to be engaged by Polyco to make them inclusive in our plan. The components that need to be in our plan. So this comes straight from the legislation in terms of how we need to build our plan to answer what the Department of Environmental Affairs is asking from the producers as well as the PROs. So we need to know our strategic partnerships. That's throughout the value chain, but largely also focusing on municipalities and the waste pickers. We need to understand the finances in terms of how we're going to build a EPR fee and then also collect that and then distribute that to the beneficiaries. Then the logistics and collection. This is going to be a challenging part, but this is also going to be with partnership with other PROs and municipalities. We'll have a section specifically working on the informal sector and understanding how they can be better integrated, and some of those that want to be formalized into the waste value chain, so they can not only stay at the rung that they are in terms of informal collection, but move up into more formal collection, be integrated into that system and build business out of the work that they're already doing. Monitoring evaluation is going to be key. So we're going to need to develop robust systems that allows us to grow with our membership base. So if we're going to have the existing membership that we have right now, we need to be able to bring on new members by the 4th of November when people are going to sign up. The sooner you sign up, the easier we can adapt plans to meet your requirements. The later you sign up means that we will only be able to develop plans for you much later. So that will be focusing on our members. And then where does the money go from the EPR fee? Is the sector development, investing into collection and recycling projects, as well as research and development, how we transform the industry currently, and then focusing on those end-use markets where the material should go. And then we'll need to achieve the targets that the legislation has put out for us. And then assurance, making sure that we do not double count the tonnages, and that when someone pays for the product that they put on the market, that you're only paying one fee and you do not double pay through the value chain. So what are we going to do? So in April, we've been working to the legislation in terms of developing a framework against it and how we're going to comply to it and understanding the current status quo. Then in May, this is where we are starting to network with the key stakeholders and sort of developing the solutions to the challenges that we are seeing. We'll be engaging key stakeholders like waste collectors, municipalities, education awareness specialists. And in June, we'll have our first draft in terms of our costing and disbursement formulation. And then in July is when we want to dialogue with our members to illustrate what we have done in terms of building a plan for them and with them, so they can start understanding what are the costs going to be to their business, and then they can provide input in terms of how we should adjust that. So you must remember, when it comes down to an EPR scheme, it's made for and by members. So if you want to be part of the system that is developing a plan for your company or your sector, you have to become a member. You do not have to become a member with Polyco, but you can become a member of another PRO that represents polyolefin plastics, or you can develop one for yourself. And then in August, we'll have our draft plan more finalized, and we'll consult again with our members for review. And then in September, we'll be wrapping up with our final changes. And in October, we'll be preparing to implement our plan. All right, okay. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for everyone that's listening, and I will entertain any questions during the question and answer phase.
Thanks, Quentin. We've had quite a number of questions posed during the Q&A session. Just to answer Rob Dupree and Deidre Dipena, I think both of you have asked for the list of registered EPR schemes, as well as a complete list of all the PROs that are currently in existence and that are compliant. What we'll do about those is that after this webinar, we will email you the comprehensive list that we have available. And like we've said earlier, that these are already PROs in existence, and obviously there's still an area that needs a PRO. New PROs can actually be formed, and the Act is very clear as to how a PRO gets formed. Okay, I think most of the questions appear to be directed to you, Anbun, so let's go through them one by one. And there are some just technical, maybe some will just require a short answer. The first one is, how will companies survive the added financial impact of having to pay PRO fees, in addition to the high overall cost of doing manufacturing in these tough economic times in South Africa?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Mohammed. Maybe I don't understand the question. When they talk about tough economic times, generally when you determine the cost of goods, we take into consideration the cost of the raw materials, the labor cost, your transport cost, your profit margin, and the cost to get it from place of manufacture to retailer. That has been the traditional way of getting to the cost of goods as such. And a key component that has been eliminated is the cost of managing the product at the end of its life, or waste management as such. So I think it's imperative now that we change this way of thinking, and that's we incorporate into the cost. That's one way of looking at it. But if the manufacturer or the producer is of the view that they can, manage the cost within the sector or the industry, however they choose it, it's their call. When it comes to balancing the cost, I think we are all familiar with sustainable development. We are all familiar with global warming. We are all familiar with the issue of our depletion of our landfill airspace. Something has to be done. And unfortunately, we have to make some hard choices and hard calls. So this is one of those calls that we have to make. And yep, we have principles in place, as I indicated in my portion of the segment of the talk, on the polluter pays principle. So I think that's what we have to go through. So it doesn't necessarily.
Okay, thanks, Anbun. I think the next two.
The manufacturer must also describing. We are saying what needs to be done. Thank you.
I don't know, sorry, you got, I didn't hear the last bit. If you can just say that last part again.
So what we're saying as government is, without describing what must be done, we've provided options and I've outlined those options. Thank you.
Okay. The next two questions are linked in that, is there a minimum tonnage of waste per month or per annum that triggers having to join a PRO? Maybe you can just talk about that briefly.
Yeah, we have put in a threshold only on the paper and packaging sector, and that's for obvious reasons. It's because of the lightweight of most of the material. If I recall, the threshold is 10 tons per annum. I stand to be corrected, but I think it's 10 tons. I have not looked at it for a while. I think that threshold, but it's only applicable to the paper and packaging. And I see Francois shaking his head, which means I'm guessing. Thanks, Francois.
Okay, Francois, maybe you can add to
Thanks, Dr. Abdul. Yeah, no, I just wanted to concur that it is 10 tons minimum, minimum, I mean.
Okay. All right, then the next question is about, would the fees that we as a producer have to pay, which is above our current fee to a disposal company, for example, EnviroServe, how does the environmental department manage these companies as they are currently under investigation, yet still accept waste? And they give an example, Shongweni landfill site mainly, as well as the DSW scandal. So we have no control of their so-called ISO standards, if any. So what measures are being placed by the DFFE in order to manage these external service providers that recycle material? Anban?
Okay, yeah. And I think just to get the one question, has got about 5 questions grouped in one. And the subject matter for discussion today is on EPR. It's got nothing to do with compliance and enforcement. So I will deal with the EPR portion. The fee that will be paid to a PRO, I'm not sure whether it's over and above the disposal costs, but your disposal costs are separate from EPR fees as far as I understand, but I'm sure the other panelists can assist me with that. The disposal cost is what you pay when you either for refuse removal or if you're disposing of industrial waste or something in that like. Your EPR fees is for the management of your products or your material at the end of its life. So yeah, I think I'm going to stop my question there. The other political issues I'm not going to get into now. Thank you, Chair.
All right, are there any other panel members that would want to add to that question? Quentin, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so it all depends on how your producer responsibility organization is put together, but largely producer responsibility organizations that are investing into the end use market, which create a market for the materials that it can be recycled. So the collection of that materials from your factory or for your households still needs to be factored in terms of direct cost to you. So the end life of that product, it will be addressed in the EPR fee, but moving that material from your factory to a material recovery facility still needs to be covered from that business. The EPR fee deals with it at its end of its life, going back into recycling, into another product. We build in an end use market to create material worth for the material leaving your factory. In the case of metal packaging, which already has an intrinsic value, someone might come to your factory and then they will pay you for that material. But that's not always the case in terms of materials. Some materials do not have that intrinsic value, and it's very difficult to actually build in a market value. But with more investment in recycling, it might reach that levels, but sometimes it still has a negative value. Therefore, you need to pay for the removal of your waste from your factory. So you're not going to get away from that with EPR.
Okay. As a converter, if you already paid the levy when buying the paper, do you still need to pay an EPR fee?
Okay, yeah, I hope this is addressed to me, Dr. Mohammed. I'm just stepping in.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, the intention of the regulation is to pay the fee once only. We don't want double counting, double charging, etc. So if you paid for the paper and it already has the levy included, then I think you're fine. I think you just need to check in terms of the definition, which category you fall, what are you, and then register appropriately, and then you'll be able to know whether you the fee is applicable to you or not. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So at the moment, joining a PRO is totally voluntary, and some companies have already joined knowing that the implementation and rollout of the Act is inevitable. So using both the carrot and stick approach, how can companies firstly be motivated to join? And secondly, how will the department be dealing with the free riders, that is, companies who refuse to register with the PRO and do not pay the required fees until after November 5th deadline kicks in? So maybe Anban, you can look at that one as well, perhaps.
Yeah, Chair, maybe also, see the questions you're reading out, sometimes they're not very clear. I'll make some assumptions, but I will clarify the assumptions as such. Chair, when it comes to motivating companies, I don't think we're going to motivate a company to register. This is law. It's part of the legislation, and it has consequences to comply with the law. Now, in terms of companies not paying the fee and not registering, if you don't register by the close of business or by the end of the 4th of November, and you are supposed to register, you are in non-compliance and there's a consequence. We have our compliance and enforcement colleagues that are waiting anxiously to start a blitz on that particular area. Now, that's the assumption that I made, that if you don't register by the 5th of November or by the 4th of November as such. Now, if you don't pay the fee by that period, it's the same situation, that you'll be in non-compliance because you are meant to be paying that fee because it's legislated for. Now, what I'm also reading in the question is, if somebody decides to register on the 4th of November, you are compliant. If you start paying a fee on the 4th of November, you are compliant. So there's no implications or consequences as such, provided you do that by the closing date. So yeah, I hope I've answered it clearly. That's what I understand, both the options. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Then the next one says, does EPR regulations include eco-modulation of fees?
Forgive my limitation on English. Eco-modulation is, if any of my colleagues or the panelists can assist me with that, I'll gladly answer if it still falls within.
And do any of the panel members like to wager a solution to this?
An eco-modulated fee refers to if a product is easier to recycle, it has a lower levy versus someone which is more difficult to recycle. So to use a polyolefin example, looking at lightweight flexibles in terms of BOPP chip packets or very small formats, should you pay a higher price on a small format flexible that is not picked up and just blows around and becomes litter, versus a HDPE milk bottle, which is rigid and it finds its way into the separation source stream quite easily. Should member companies be paying different fees based on the products that they are putting on the market?
Yeah, Chair, thank you for that. Chair, we have provided some rationale for the calculation of fees. I'm not sure the regulation number, but it talks about weight of the product, ease of recycling, demand for the product, all of those requirements or those options are available. And that would be, the PRO would start determining that in consultation with the industry as such. I think it's not just going to be the PRO determining the fee and then saying this is the fee. There will be some level of consultation that would take place because the industry may have more intimate and technical knowledge on the actual product itself. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. And the last one for you, Anban, is, have all the required PROs been formed and registered?
Chair, the registration officially opens on the 5th of May 2021. So as far as PROs being formed, I can't comment on that. I think the colleagues that are represented there will be able to comment on that. As far as registration goes, none of them are registered if they have been formed thus far. There's no registration because we're only opening up the registration on the 5th of May. And the reason for that is the legislation was postponed by a gazette on the 15th of January, moving the implementation date to the 5th of May. So if we open the registration now, we might find ourselves with a legal challenge. If somebody has registered before the 5th of, So that is why, to avoid any complications and confusion, we have left it to the 5th of May. And on the morning of the 5th of May, the website or the link will be posted on the department's website with a small, narrative would allow people to enter and to follow the link and to register. We will also have the link on the SAWIC website where people can enter. And what we've done is we've removed the paperwork. We've made it primarily electronic. You basically register online. You upload your CIPC documents, whatever relevant documents are required, you upload them, and then it acknowledges receipt, and then somebody looks at the attachments, and then it approves. You get an email from the system that says you are now registered as the PRO, as the producer, importer, brand owner, refurbisher, retailer, etc., etc. This is your registration number. You get it by email, and it's done and dusted. If your contact person or your phone number or your premises changes, you have a username and password that will also be attached to the email. You can log on to the system on your own and amend the physical address, postal address, telephone number, etc., emails, whatever. You manage it yourself. We've removed the human element to make sure that we are quite efficient in the way we do it. But yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thanks. Francois, you wanted to add something?
Thanks, Dr. Abdul. Yeah, I think there's two actions that's important here. So the first action would be, as Mr. Pillay said, in terms of your registrating with government. And then, of course, the other one is if you decide to join a PRO, my suggestion would be that you do so sooner than later. And the reason for that is that you can then be part of the determining of the EPR scheme and the relevant fees that needs to be determined in order to do the interventions that is required as per the regulations. So if you do not register with your PRO now, if you chose to go with a PRO, you would end up by joining an EPR scheme that you have had no say in. So I strongly suggest that anybody that is obliged by law to register and to have a PRO or an EPR scheme, that you do so with your appropriate PROs ASAP. Thank you.
Okay. And perhaps a final question is, does the producer upload the reports on the website after registration? That is there a standard reporting format and at what intervals? I think maybe this question anybody can answer. The idea about uploading reports on the website after registration. And is there a standard reporting?
Dr. Mohammed, sorry to interject. I'm going to answer it very quickly. I have another meeting that's at 10:30 and I'm already receiving messages of why I'm not there. But my apologies for that. I'll answer and then I'll leave. Chair, we are in the process of developing a reporting module. So what would happen is people would have the username and the password upon registration. And if you are a person that needs to report, you can access and report. We will be consulting on the development of this module to make sure that everybody is happy with the information that we have there. The module hasn't been done yet, but we have a year to do it, but we'll be on it. So our apologies for that, but yeah. So just to be sure that it will be done on the SAWIC website. It's a government website and we want to be able to make sure that it's protected, the information. We have managed to keep our information secure in the last 13 years that it's been in place. So we still want to maintain that. And we're moving away from paperwork as such. Yeah, so you don't need to necessarily, scan and upload and send your reports. It'll be online where you'll manage it by username and password. Yeah, thank you, Chair. And my apologies, and I don't mean to be rude, but I have to run to the next meeting.
Sure. Okay, we'll excuse you, Anban, and thanks for your time.
Thank you so much. And cheers, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Anban.
Okay. Before we close, I think I'll just give the four panelists a closing comment or remarks that you'd like to make the next 2 minutes. So please go ahead. Francois, should we start with you?
Thank you, Dr. Abdul. Yes, as I said previously, I think it's important if you are an obliged entity, as per the EPR regulations, that you decide where and how you would be compliant in terms of your EPR schemes. And as I said, if you choose to have a PRO manage it on your behalf, my suggestion is join now, be part of the process, and make sure that it is the best interventions in terms of your products. Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Kishan. Your final comments?
Thanks, Dr. Mohammed. Yeah, look, I think we must just have the big picture perspective in mind. We're 7.8 billion on the planet now. And over the last 80 to 100 years, our demand for natural resources has seen a significant incline. In fact, it's an absolutely accelerated. You just need to see the graph, which I don't have with me, but we all need to act together now to become less dependent on natural resources, so that we could have a more sustainable future for our grandkids, great-great-grandkids. So we should all act responsibly now. Thank you.
Okay, Adri, your comments?
Thank you. Just a closing comment to add that I spoke quite a bit about polystyrene, but yes, I am also responsible for the South African Vinyls Association EPR plan for vinyl packaging, which most of it is actually imported into the country as far as packaging is concerned. So this will be a very young, new endeavor, which I will be running in the beginning, and then we'll see how that progresses. But if you do need to speak about vinyls, you are still able to talk to me. It will probably continue, but I don't want to go ahead of what my board has to decide. Thank you very much.
Okay, Quentin?
Thank you, everyone, for joining and showing your interest in terms of what our legislation is saying, as well as what the PROs can offer. I would like to reiterate in terms of what Francois was saying, that this is a membership-driven intervention. And if you're not a member of a PRO, you cannot provide input in terms of how those plans are developed. And that includes the EPR fee. So the fee needs to be compliant with the legislation. And if you read the legislation, there's a list of requirements that the producer is responsible for and obligated for. And then there's also requirements which for a PRO that needs to do if they're going to do it on behalf of a producer. And us as PROs, we can only do it on your behalf if you designate us the responsible organization. And because we are member driven, we need to listen to what our members say. So if we only have 10% or 20% of the market, we represent only 10 or 20% of the market. That means that we are not covering you, and you cannot be informed by how our fee is developed. So joining soon is one way to get your voice heard, and then we build a plan together for yourselves, as well as the broader industry. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot to all the panel members. I think just on the chat line, there were one or two interesting comments which I thought I must share. Samantha does say that I can't recycle ice cream tubs. They are just too useful. So I'm a big repurposer. And then Anel also says, oh, as a takeaway for leftovers for visitors, can't send my Tupperwares away. So I think we're all doing recycling and repurposing in some way on an individual level, and we thank you all for doing that. Okay, and then I think there was also a request for a copy of this particular webinar to be made available, and Practical Publishing does do that. Within the next 24 hours, I think they'll compile something for the benefit of all the participants, as well as others that might have missed it. And secondly, there was even a request for maybe a like executive summary of what was said, because very often we don't have the time to listen to the full 1.5 hours, and a short summary will also actually assist. And then finally, also that list of PROs as well as the EPRs schemes that are currently up and running, we'll formulate that list and circulate that as well. So with that, I think I'd like to end this webinar. And thank you all once again for your participation and your concern, and I think your interest for the well-being of the environment is noted, and hopefully we will all succeed in this together. Thank you. God bless. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Dr. Mohammed. Bye.